Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Hamamoto, and the date is September 21, 2025, and the time is 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Man, oh man, do I have a talk prepared for you today. And I was working on the edits of the several clips that I've assembled for you today, right up to the last moment. And today's talk is titled Wes Craven. He's the famous director, producer, distributor. Well, I don't think he's a distributor, writer, screenwriter, and I would say critic as well. Wes Craven and the cultural engineering of transgenerational trauma. And that is to include primarily the millennial generations, if you want to go by those categories. For example, I'm a boomer, a baby boomer, and my cohort, my generation, went through a series of, I'll use the term trauma because it's well understood in the parlance. I have some problems with it, but I'll use it just for convenience. But my generation, the so-called boomers, went through a series of heavy, heavy traumas, and more specifically, traumas associated with violent death. And that's appropriate to today's recent shootings, assassination attempts, and ritualistic murders, such as that of Charlie Kirk. And as we speak right now, there are hundreds of, maybe, I don't know, hundreds of them, but thousands of people in person at an arena in Arizona memorializing the contributions of Charlie Kirk, right? So we're talking about actually existing history. I don't need to remind you of that. But for those people who are living in a live action role play state of mind, it's usually abbreviated to LARP, live action role play, or if you're microdosing on hallucinogens and are experiencing life in a permanent liminal stage, not subliminal, not fully conscious, definitely, but in between. For you, everything's cosplay or costume play. Everything is for you, not you who are watching, is a form of live action role play. So you often hear people when they witness something real in RL, real life, they said, oh, it was just like the movie. Well, today I'm going to disentangle some of these different knotted threads, and how the cultural industries, and you know this in general, how the cultural industries are responsible for manufacturing and disseminating the specific generational traumas that we see every 15 to 20 years, roughly 20 years, let's say. I've already spoken about the baby boom in the case of my parents. It was the Great Economic Depression, World War II, right? Practically all my friends, my father, all the families, they were all in the military at the same time. All these young men around the same age have this commonality of experience of being shot at and putting their lives on the line for some vague idea of mom and apple pie and country, not to minimize the patriotic impulse, right? You get what I'm saying so far as generational trauma is concerned. So I'm arguing here that for the post-Vietnam War generation, and I'm of that generation, Vietnam War, and so is Wes Craven. We'll talk more about his biographical timeline as it operates with his film career, right? Um, for the millennial generation, Wes Craven, who came from the previous boomer generation, and he died not that long ago, I think in 2015. People are People meaning critics as well as journalists are reassessing his work right now. Books are coming out, critical work, and I'm chiming in because I have a unique perspective, as I am want to do, where it comes to some of these critical orthodoxies that are beginning to emerge. First of all, though, before I begin, I didn't want to forget, I wanted to thank three people for your support recently. One is Lena Pooh, who put on an incredible um, time in her talk last Sunday on very short notice on a very, very sensitive, emotional topic, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And by the comments that I read, most of you appreciated her insights. I know I did. And then the second person I'd like to thank is Mr. Sean Atwood. He had me on just a few days ago to comment upon the shooting in Orem, Utah, and its wider implications. And I purposely went into areas that I don't see others bringing up. By the way, while I'm at it, I should tell you, he reached out to me this morning and invited me back on for a follow-up if I had anything more to say. And believe you me, I do have a lot more to say. And I won't give it away right now, but I'll have a couple of days, hopefully, to put my thoughts together, and I'll come back and put forth my argument, and you can evaluate it, see if it's useful. I think it is. So thank you, Sean Atwood, for that. That talk, by the way, went over well over 100,000 views, which for me is a lot of views because, as you know, I'm shadow banned. You'll never see me as an expert, cultural forensics expert on any of these true crime shows run by people like Nancy Grace or whoever else, and Jeanette Levy, or even Brian Enton, it's one of the few of those guys that I respect. You'll never see me on it, but you will see me on the Sean Atwood Show. And the third person I want to thank before I move into the talk today is you on the Patreon page, because you're supporting my work and allowing me to purchase these books. This is a critical biography of Wes Craven, right? And it turned out to be, because I didn't know anything about the book. I haven't read it cover to cover, but it's really good. I recommend it. It's called The Soul of Wes Craven, and I think it's appropriately titled Soul because I'm talking about Wes Craven. He is interested in the soul of humanity, and I'll get into that in a moment. So again, thank you all the Patreons for your support, and I know I have some new Patreons, new subscribers today. Thanks to Mr. Sean Atwood. Welcome. And you will be entering a whole new world of exploration. And hopefully it'll help you with your writing, your research, your thoughts. If you have sons, daughters in college, university, you can talk about these issues, forward them articles that I'm sending to you on Patreon. They can write papers on it, because we need to put this information, these insights, into the larger world of ideas. We can't even let these indie mavens hog up all the bandwidth, so to speak, so far as these ideas are concerned. And that's why I'm on this show, even though I have only 60,000 subscribers. So while you're at it, press the subscribe button so that I can become a YouTube celebrity. I'm just kidding. That'll never happen. But you know the phenomenon. By the way, in Scream 6, I believe, I haven't seen all of them, the franchise. I'm talking about the film franchise set off by Wes Craven. I haven't seen it, but I'm reading in this book that they talk about, kind of anticipates the obsession with social media and so-called influencers. So that's another reason why reviewing these films in retrospect are not just a matter of curiosity, but it helps us understand our cultural history and where we're heading with all this. All right. So thanks again for all your support. I'm very gratified that at last my insights are beginning to break through the barrier that's been erected to keep me from reaching the larger audience, right? And you know what? If you're a Candace Owens fanboy, that's okay. That's fine. I mean, you can write that in the comment, or whoever else I happen to mention in not so flattering terms. There's room enough for everybody. I don't know why you. Well, I do know why. It has a lot to do with this fandom psychology, and we've seen a extreme on the way to normalization, perhaps, but an extreme expression of fandom with the furry phenomenon, right? Because that's what's being held up to us now. Wasn't that guy so weird? But of course, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface there. And by the way, I gave a talk on furries and furry fandom a long time ago. All right. So the mainstream, even the indie people, are way behind the curve as far as, because I'm not following the headlines. I don't look at Google and see what the trends are. I create the trends. I don't trend follow. And I don't do it for commercial purposes. I do it to lay bare insights that are either being suppressed or deliberately ignored. And you will hear some of these thoughts in this talk today about the transgenerational trauma. All right, first let's talk about Wes Craven very briefly, because I encourage you to buy this book or just look at articles online. I don't have to repeat all the biographical information. There's all these repeaters on TubeU that write these little chat GPT scripts with all the dates and information, right? Those guys are making my job easier, right? They also make someone like me with my talents, my skills, more valuable to the larger society and culture, because my ideas are coming from the brain, from the soul, from the intellect. And Chat GPT will never be able to duplicate that. You hear that? Sammy Boy Altman? It's not going to happen. And it's not my unique skill. It's also you who are endowed with this ability, if you choose to exercise these skills, these God-given skills, right? I call my methodology cultural forensic. You name whatever you do after whatever you like, but it's very basic science. It's induction and deduction, if you want to reduce it to its simplest. But we've all, including myself, have been herded into TubeU land and TikTok land and X land, Twitter land. We've all become a bunch of twits on Twitter with these little fragments here, right? So that's why I do the long form. This talk's going to go over an hour. Typically, they run for about an hour, 20 minutes or so. I try not to go over 90 minutes. Wes Craven was born in 1939, right around the time that World War II was underway in Europe, and he died not that long ago. I think of brain cancer, if I'm not mistaken, 2015. And he had a quite productive film career. And as is the case with most careers. He didn't set out to be a horror director or become known as a slasher film guy. He had higher aspirations. He was an artist by whatever definition you want to apply, Wes Craven. In fact, I mean, for what it's worth, he majored in literature and philosophy I think as an undergraduate. I think also in his master's level, he went to grad school. He had a master's degree, which is the minimum professional credential you need in order to teach college. And he did manage to get a teaching position for a short while. I don't know why he fell out of it. Supposedly he became entranced by film at the late age of 30. I'll let him explain himself. That's kind of late to be brought in at age 30. And I have some ideas. I couldn't find anything in here, but my suspicion is that he was recruited as a young man. We'd have to look into his family lines, his bloodlines, who are the Cravens, both the paternal line and the maternal line. We can get some insight from his education, Wheaton College, liberal arts college, but conservative Protestant denomination, who had a very progressive social agenda at its founding, Wheaton College. This is in Illinois. They were abolitionists when it wasn't popular. In fact, it was criminal. And Wheaton College served as one of the way stations in the so-called Underground Railroad. That's how far back he goes. So he has that going on in his training and his education, formal education. And he's interested in writing, right? He's an artsy type person. And he's going through all these different contradictions within himself because, according to Craven, he grew up in a strict Baptist household where you couldn't sing and dance, let alone smoke and drink. And you could not go to the movie house. Like going to the movies is like going to a whorehouse. There are still some fundamentalist congregations out there that either ban it or they frown on it deeply. So what did he do? He went to making movies. This is like the Whore of Babylon itself. And he eventually, at a fairly young age, moved down to New York, where he was learning the nuts and bolts of filmmaking through advertising. I think he did corporate films or industrial films in New York City, but he also made tons of porno movies. A man after my own heart. So you can see the inner contradictions within the person, the soul of Wes Craven. And these types of characters are fascinating. By the way, I also followed up a hunch, and I discovered, again, through this book, thank you, Patreons, that for a while, Wes, I guess this was when he was down in New York City, he was a member of the Sullivan cult. Remember the talk I gave several months ago, maybe a year ago, 2 years, I can't remember. The Sullivanians. It was a sex cult in the upper New York City, Upper West Side, I believe, full of artists, intellectuals, critics, professional people, attorneys, professors, writers, singers. Remember Judy Collins? Someday Soon, the song, well, she didn't write it, but she made it popular. Judy Collins was a member of the Sullivanians. The Sullivanians also were responsible for recruiting people who wrote for the arts and culture publications in New York City. So they were kind of responsible for popularizing or disseminating abstract expressionism, for example, right? See how the culture migrates, and you don't really learn about the underpinnings of what we are given as exemplars of the culture. Whoever it might be, Willem de Kooning, Jackson Pollock had a connection with the Sullivanians. So if you want to check more into that area, look at my talk or buy a book. There's a book called The Sullivanians. And one of my patrons, I believe, was the person who said, "Hey, you might want to check this book. It's, given what you're interested in, this thing." And so it was a really good lead, and I am still benefiting from it because I see that Wes Craven comes out of this cult. There's a lot of sex, a lot of orgies. This is like P. Diddy land before when P. Diddy was still a little baby. He was in diapers up in Harlem. Well, he didn't grow up in Harlem. He was a suburban black boy, His father made a lot of money. They didn't have to live in the hood. His father was big time gangster. You know the story, the backstory there. So anyway, we'll return to some of these other features of Wes Craven. His college years was 57 to 63. A lot of Cold War paranoia that he grew up with, in addition to his strict Baptist upbringing, into the Vietnam War, which is a very important timeline point here, because a lot of his movies, if not all of them, are a displacement from the imperial anger, aggression, and murder that is part and parcel with the American experience. In this case, this was the routine killing of large numbers of yellow people, my people, right? And of course, this was part of the history of American empire in the Philippines. Many of you don't know that the United States was at war with the Philippines for 2 years. It's called the Philippine-American War. It's not because they were allies, they were enemies. And now, if you talk to a Filipino American, they see me as the enemy because all they see is a yellow face of Japanese extraction, but they over-identify with the colonial. I mean, they don't talk about how America took over the Philippines, which was a Spanish colony, as most of you know. Japan was there for about 2 or 3 years at the most during what we call the World War II, right? And of course, just as an aside, you know that the Philippines was founded as a free Masonic republic, right? When I talk about Freemasonry and Mormonism, like on the Sean Atwood show, I'm not talking about a one-off. I'm talking about a global system of control. And this is another example of the Republic of the Philippines, which was supposed to be a democracy, the only democracy outside the reviled Japanese occupiers. By the way, lots of Filipinos worked directly with the Japanese Imperial Army. And then when the Americans came in, they switched flags and they waved those around. But the biggest flag that they have is that of the Freemasonic National Philippine. That's all Freemasonic symbology. All right. I haven't found a connection with Wes Craven yet in that area, but who knows? There might be something. All right. So after Wheaton College, Wes Craven went to Johns Hopkins, and we're already getting into sort of elite education. Maybe he had more finishing, let's say polishing, so far as his aspirations. I think it was probably at Johns Hopkins where he was tapped, not by Skull and Bones, just tapped for intelligence work, or there's this system where they can identify young men on the make. Right, this is an up and comer, and more recently, women as well, and they're doing it across all the different racial groups, ethnicities, and religion. Before it was just white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, but they broaden the spectrum. And by the way, you're looking at someone who was tapped, me. Or I didn't get to where I was just by my pure genius, right? people said this guy over here, Hamamoto, could be a useful asset down the road here. So I went through all, yeah, I've told you this before, the different sort of Herculean exercises, trials, tests through there, right? But this talk is not about me. But I'm familiar with the process. That's why I'm inferring about Wes Craven. He didn't just overnight become a horror director. And then, kind of interestingly, from 64 to 65, he got a job at a liberal arts college in Delaware. Or I'm sorry, not Delaware, but in Pennsylvania. And now we're talking about, and I've done this in a true crime talk previously about the Valley area, Happy Valley, like Penn State. And we're talking about the so-called Pennsylvania Dutch culture. There's a very strong connection between spookiness, eeriness, and horror in that part of America. And more than a few cases of sensational crimes, including serial killers, are centered in that geographic location, just like a lot of them take place also in the Pacific Northwest or the Intermountain West, Utah, Idaho, Western Washington, Oregon, right? The Green River Killer, Ted Bundy, on and on. They seem to have a certain geographic territory that they map out. And in previous talks, I've tried to explain why that might be so. Excuse me a second. All right, so we're getting a little bit of an idea, at least I am, of where Craven is evolving into. And then, of course, as I told you, he did his apprenticeship making porn movies, including the famous Deep Throat with Linda Lovelace. Most of you know, because there have been documentaries made and in the lore, tons of articles written about Linda Lovelace herself wrote an autobiography. You know that it was a mob-financed operation. And I say that because if we want to understand where Wes Craven came from and why he's doing what he, and who his masters are, we have to know where the money came from, right? I think it came from an alphabet agency. That's my suspicion. I'll try to provide you some information on how I'm inferring this, right? But a lot of it, in the early days was mob money. They had to launder the money. That's really what you're talking about, the film business now. Come on. That's what it's about. Okay, before I get too far afield, let's hear from the man himself, Wes Craven. This is his origin story.
When I try to think of where becoming a horror film director came from, I can only speculate. First of all, I never thought of making movies until I was almost 30. I was raised in a fundamentalist Baptist church. Almost all social things of any import were really within the church. And one of the beliefs they had, besides you can't play cards and dance and smoke and drink alcohol, was that you don't go to movies because they're kind of the devil's playground. My father was buried in 45, somewhere around my 6th birthday. The few memories that I have of my father, I was really scared of him. He had an explosive temper, and you had the feeling like he could kill you at any time. It was just, one of those kind of guys. My first year in college, I came down with this very strange, unexpected paralysis. And during that time, when I came fairly close to death, I started writing poetry. That and my love of books and novels started going into writing short stories and things like that, but none of them were, about horror. Films didn't really happen until I started teaching college. We had an art theater that showed all the European films, fantastic Bergman and Fellini films, this amazing sort of fluorescence of astonishing films. That was my notion, is I want to do something like that. Quit my job. I just went to New York to figure out how to make films. The whole idea of doing a horror film never would have occurred to me. Really, it just was a matter of my having been working for this guy, Sean Cunningham, who hired me to do some syncing up dailies.
Around 1970 is when I first started to make films. I really didn't know how, and I was learning how to make all of these mistakes and how to make movies. In the middle of all of that, I meet this guy named Wes Craven. He was a rock. I mean, he was a terrific assistant, and he became a really good editor. After we had worked together for almost a year, it was like, I've got an idea, let's make a movie. We were able to get some people to put up money because of our previous relationship.
Sean said, the backers want a scary movie. Did you ever think of writing something scary? I said, no. He said, well, go write something scary, and if they like it, you can direct it. On a weekend, in 3 days, I wrote Last House on the Left. Kind of a raucous, balls to the walls, escape criminals doing horrible things movie.
The picture turned out to be very, very strong. You got to see Wes's special sensitivity for this scary, dark arena.
I don't think Sean or I thought that anybody would really see it. When it opened, it kind of created a sensation, and there were riots and protests, and people tried to get into the projection booth to destroy it. I felt like, hey, maybe we got something here.
After Last House was released, Wes felt that he had his sample reel and had a kind of a hit movie.
Actually, after Last House, I didn't make another film for, I think, almost 5 years because I was trying to do other kinds of films. And then at a certain point, my friend said, I can get you money to make a scary movie, write something else scary. That became Hills Have Eyes.
The Hills Have Eyes, another sort of strange, stark, semi-horror thing which he was able to get done. And at the same time, Wes had moved to California, was trying to make his career here and got to do a couple of movies. Wes became a successful director, but he's still haunted by this idea of going back and trying to do this special movie.
Nightmare was written after I'd done 2 films back to back. I had made enough money on them to, take 6 months off. So I basically took 6 months off and wrote and refined the script, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay, now this is a connection I finally made today and putting the finishing touches on this talk here, because I was interested in this character, Sean Sexton Cunningham. He's the producer. That means he's the money man. And then our friend, Mr. Wes Craven himself says, well, we ran into some people who had some money, but they wanted a horror film. Who were these people, right? And why a horror film? That's why I think this is an alphabet agency operation. I think they wanted to engineer horror in the post-Vietnam period. By post, I'm talking about 1975. The Vietnam War participation by the U.S. military was over in 1973. By 75, most of the military had been pulled back. And in their wake, the U.S. military had left about 2 million deaths, Cambodian, Laotian, and Vietnamese civilians, in addition to close to 60,000 American combatants. All right, so that fits the definition of generational trauma. So what's going to fill the void for the bloodlust? Because it's still there. And if those of you remember back then, there was no real sense that the war ended. All of a sudden, the troops came home. A couple of movies were made, like Coming Home, featuring Jane Fonda, and a couple of movies made about psychopathic killing Vietnam veterans returning. But we, as a society and the government, forgot about them. They're still pretty much forgotten, right? So far as the benefits, medical health benefits that are due them, right? We just that's a lost generation. And some of those people did go off the rails. I'm not going to deny that. So filling that void was Wes Craven. And not only was he filling the void of the bloodlust that's part of the American saga back to colonial times, right? Because this harkens back to the colonial contact, the Indian Wars, and the European settlers. But it's also a trauma that's directed specifically to the so-called millennial generation, right? People like Neve Campbell, Rose McGowan, David Arquette, Courtney Cox. Do these names ring a bell? They're all in the Scream 1, 2, 3, and 4. Plus, they all have careers outside of the franchise, the Scream franchise, right? You know, Courtney Cox as being one of the ensemble players in Friends. And here she's playing against type in this horror series, right? And of course, you heard more in more recent days or years, but now about Rose McGowan and her her abuse at the hands of people like Harvey Weinstein, who, by the way, him and his brother Bob with Miramax had a hand in developing, I think it was Scream 3 and 4 and beyond. So that's probably when he met Rose McGowan and S8'd her, according to her book, which I've reviewed on this channel here. But now if you watch Scream 3 in today, which I recommend you do, it's easily available. I think you can find it for free on YouTube if you look at the right channel. But pick it up. It's, DVDs are dirt cheap. Buy them now while they're still available. Watch Scream 3 and think about all the Me Too activity that surfaced subsequently to that. That's another reason why the Scream series is so important, because I think Craven was putting in these little tidbits in there to tell us how these films are really made. And he was introducing us, the audience, without us really realizing it, the seediness, the pornography of commercial filmmaking run by miscreants like the Weinstein brothers. All right. So check that out again. This is what I was at. And there's all kinds of these asides and comments and jokes about actresses sleeping with the director so they can get parts in these movies within the movie. Because part of the Scream franchise, number 2, 3, 4, and so on, is that these are meta movies. They're movies about movies. Not only do they cite the classic horror films that we all grew up with, but they cite other horror films in the immediate preceding era, right? Friday the 13th, Halloween, John Carpenter, people like that. And that becomes one of the structuring principles of the Scream franchise. Better than me explaining it, watch it yourself and you'll pick it up and you'll say, wow, I'm really smart. I get all the different pop culture references. So that's part of the thrill. You are being fed. You're gratified for being smart and knowing, and then you're an insider. You get it, right? But they're also making a commentary, at least Wes Craven and his writer or writers are breaking down what these films represent. So they know exactly what they're doing and how they're playing with the formula. All right. If you don't know who I'm talking about, let's just take a quick look at Rose McGowan. This, I don't know if I'd call it her breakthrough role. I knew about her earlier than Scream when she was an indie actress. She's very, very good. By the way, I should tell you that when Scream 1, 2, and 3 came out, I boycotted those movies. I was not interested. We're talking about 70 or 96, 97, 98. They started coming out almost like every year, right? Because number one, I was a film snob like Wes Craven himself. I was interested in watching the classic neo-realist films of the 1950s, the golden age of post-war Japanese world cinema, and of course the American classics themselves. I wasn't interested in no cheesy horror films because I associated that with what I watched on Saturday mornings on television, reruns, and Roger Corman movies with The Creature from the Black Lagoon and dinosaurs and cheesy effects. I gave a talk on Corman, and he's going to come up in this conversation shortly, right? Hang on. So I boycotted them. And only now am I, today, right? This is the first run through that you're seeing live. Only now am I looking at his work with a critical eye, right? And forget about me, right? This is not, this doesn't matter what my opinion is, but I would say that Wes Craven is probably one of the most or more important film directors in the English language, in America at least, maybe even in the world, right? And I think his reputation is going to grow now that he's dead, and there are doctoral dissertations that are going to be written and books adapted from the doctoral. You're going to read all kinds of garbage and terminology and film theory about Wes Craven. Forget about it. Just study the history, study the historical timeline, and that's all you need to know. Unless you are a academic type, then you have to get into the jargon, right? That's the ticket price, the price of the ticket for admission into respectability, academic respectability. I suspect that's one of the reasons why Wes Craven left the academic world. He wanted to make movies. He wanted to affect people. And he wasn't going to do it teaching people literature, although it's important, right? By the way, another reason why I'm bringing this up here and now is that for people who are going into teaching, you can start widening the curriculum and deepening it to push out DEI, GLBTQ. You can say, well, we're going to talk about Wes Craven. And then all your students are going to go, wow, really? Scream? Neve Campbell? They probably won't remember her, but they will remember the remake of Scream, perhaps 2010, which wasn't that good, but it's available. And they understand the idea of horror franchise now. But at the same time, they're going to be learning about where all this material is coming from. It's coming from very deep, dark, subterranean, evil places, right? The dark side of the soul. And Craven was very much in touch with it. And he was aware of it, consciously aware of it on an intellectual level. Craven was there. This is why I say that he will, if not already, will be seen as being one of the top 10 American filmmakers in whatever list that's compiled. All right. I don't need to convince you. I'm just sharing with you part of the reason why he's important to this discussion. All right, let's move on. Let's just take a quick glimpse at Rose McGowan, running out of time very quickly, just so you can jog your memory. Just a couple seconds here.
Should be.
Yeah.
Tits. See?
Oh, get it. Hey, grab another beer, would you?
Am I the beer wench?
She was nominated. She was nominated for terrorism.
You're not gonna believe who's here. It's that chick from Top Story.
Gail Leonard.
You're underage, son. I'm kidding.
Have a good time.
What's the driving?
Dewey. Hi. Dewey.
That's David Arquette. He gets killed here, but he's later resurrected for Scream 2, 3, and 4 because the audience liked him so. David Arquette's a really good actor.
What is she doing here?
She's with me. I'm just checking things out.
That is Neve Campbell,
So you did. Now leave and take.
and that is Rose McGowan in Profile. And she is the bad girl in these. That's part of the formula. It's suggested that she's sexually available, right, to different guys, whereas Neve Campbell is the more virginal one. Guess which one gets murdered or slashed to death? Yep, that's part of the formula.
Your medium up with you.
And that is Courtney Cox. She's also a really good actress. I was reminded of this. we didn't get to see her really her acting chops on Friends. But as a dramatic and a comedic actress, she's very good. So hopefully she'll keep being cast in dramatic films, comedy too. But she's good.
I just think you're awesome. Oh, thank you very much. I watch your show religiously. It's great. Hey.
By the way, she's a Nancy Grace type person, Courtney Cox. She's a female journalist who writes true crime books. That's why all these girls are fawning over her, because she's a celebrity.
Getting camera.
You found my father?
I'm afraid not.
Should I be worried?
Not yet.
That's the one I wore last time.
There's a commentary on this, and the directors and the writers talk about this scene as being the most paused part of the VHS tape rentals. The tape would be worn out right at this particular spot. And of course, we're running out of time. So she goes down in there, and guess what happens? The killer's there, the scream killer, right? And we'll meet him again momentarily. Now, also, as I alluded to earlier, there's a meta-critical or meta-cinematic structuring principle. I don't mean to make it sound so intellectually highbrow, but I don't know how else to describe it. But the filmmakers knew that they were really playing with the audience and with us. And you know, I admit, I really was thrilled by the effect of it. But it's kind of like Day for Night, Francois Truffaut, right? The great film New Wave, Nouvelle Vague film director, Francois Truffaut. He made Day for Night. It's a movie about movie making, right? Or you can say Cinema Paradiso is something. It's been done more than once. So Craven would know that. The writers would know that. These people all, studied film. Maybe not at NYU or USC or UCLA, but they understood the history of it, which you should and we all should understand, just like we should understand literature and literacy, right? And this is part of film literacy that we're learning here, right? So anyway, this part here that I'm about to show you serves two purposes. It establishes the fact that there's a movie within a movie within a movie within a movie that's being made, because this is Scream 3. Courtney Cox was already in 1, as we just saw, and so was David Arquette, and of course, Neve Campbell. She's the lead person, although she played a diminished role because her career skyrocketed, and she wasn't really available for a lot of shooting. So they had to kind of sideline her, even though she did show up there, right? That's 3. So it serves that function of visually explaining what I'm trying to ineptly describe to you as a meta film, meta commentary. But also I found this was a thrill for me, because you saw my talk on Roger Corman, the king of schlock films, a few weeks ago. And my suspicions about him is being a Stanford educated engineer who turned up in the film business and would show up in the Philippines, Australia, Hungary, all these places all over the world, as if he was some sort of alphabet agency courier masquerading as a film director, as if. I know that's far-fetched. That probably never has happened before, right? Just look at the biography of Arnon Milchan, or these self-confessed Israeli assets. There's probably Chinese nationals who are running around as quote unquote film producers, right? It's part of the spycraft business. And I'm not saying that Corman was a spy, but he certainly bears certain traces of it. And so does this guy who was the money man and director, Sean Sexton Cunningham. Don't let me forget him, because I looked him up. Anyway, before I do that, let's look at this very short sequence from Scream 3. And this is the thrilling part, is that Roger Corman is in it. He's uncredited. He's uncredited. He doesn't even count as a cameo. He's there. What I'm inferring is that he's a film executive from the studio, high level studio, who's being pressured for all the violence in the movies, like Scream 1 and Scream 2, Halloween, Friday the 13th, all these slasher movies that were traumatizing the millennial generation. By the time Scream 3 hit the screen, was in production, the producers were getting a lot of flack from maybe the moral majority. I'm not sure if that particular group, but groups like that. Citizens organizations, which probably weren't citizens, they probably weren't organic. They're probably alphabet fronts for all I know. But you get the idea that they were being pressured. So they said, well, let's put that in the movie. Let's kind of make fun of it, but also acknowledge the fact that we're trying to make this a less bloody and gory movie by highlighting the comedic elements, which did indeed happen in Scream 3. It's a very well done movie. Every single one of these movies are well done, which is really atypical of these franchises. Another good franchise, so far as quality is concerned, is the Chucky series, right? And that's because they have the same director and writer all the way through. Once it's turned over to a new group of people, because Wes Craven only directed the first 4, and after that, the franchise started to change. But anyway, that's a separate issue. Let's take a look at this clip here and see if you can recognize Roger Corman. He's very similar to Wes Craven in his 8th act. These guys could be, your favorite college professor, instead of making these wild movies about half-naked women in bamboo cages and with fully auto machine guns shooting down Filipinos out of banana trees. And that's Roger Corman. Here he is.
His red right hand.
You're worried about the movie, then protect the movie. Okay, hire more security, hire the National Guard, just don't kill the movie.
Violence in cinema is a big deal right now, Roman. This is not the kind of news this studio's after.
So if we stop making scary movies, what, all the psychos in the world will retire? Come on.
I've been making horror movies for 30 years, never had a psycho problem.
He was your goddamn idea, guys. All right, an ex-con with a trashy talk show, he must have pissed people off every day.
Detectives, there's no reason to presume that Cotton's death had anything to do with this movie, is there?
He was making a movie called Stab. He was stabbed.
Probably some psycho fan pissed off they killed Randy and Stab too.
Well, Tyson, that'd make you next, wouldn't it?
I am not a Randy substitute. I'm my own character.
Named Ricky, who works at the video store.
By the way, those are all characters. They're all actors working on Stab 3, which is like Scream 3, but they're playing the original characters. There's a Courtney Cox lookalike. There's a David Arquette lookalike. There's even a lookalike from the token black guy who always dies before the movie's over. And then there's Jenny McCarthy. And of course, she's got to die. She's the Rose McGowan lookalike, right? The seductive, sexually available playboy centerfold woman, Jenny McCarthy, who also came out as anti-V, I won't say the word. Some of you know what happened in her career tanked after she, like Jim Carrey, who she was with for a while, started calling out all these different psyops are going on here. So there's hope for everybody. So let's watch a little bit more of the scene. So this is the movie within the movie. You saw Roger Corman, and they're talking about screen violence.
It's an homage.
Hey, what if the killer's Sidney Prescott? I mean, what the hell ever happened to her? She's probably off in the woods living like the fucking Unabomber, man.
I'm starting to see why Tori Spelling and David Schwimmer didn't want to come back.
Guys, this was about Cotton. We are not in any danger.
We are not in any danger, says Candy, page 15.
I don't see you leaving.
You think serious black actors my age can just throw away jobs? It's all a business now. They got Usher doing Pinter off Broadway. LL Cool J's Shakespeare in the Park.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not meant to be.
Not meant to be? You win that talent search for the new Sydney, 50,000 girls, and they pick you? You gotta be praying this movie keeps going.
Of course I am, but not at the expense of people's lives.
Oh, cue the violins, right? Oh.
Jesus.
So this is the recreation of the set, which was a recreation of Woodsboro, where all the crimes are being done. And this, of course, is the Courtney Cox character. She's, I think her name's Gail Weathers. She's a investigative reporter who's being played by this actress who runs up on her in a moment.
Deja voodoo.
Gail Weathers. Oh my God. Listen, I know we've never met, and I don't mind you never returning my calls, but I have to tell you, after 2 films, I feel like I am in your mind.
Well, that would explain my constant headaches.
See, very well written and acted. Now, I'm going to just show one last clip from the screen films. This one, I think, is from number 2. And this is the sorority scene. Right, let's take a look at it. There's an obligatory, because these take place either in high school, college, and then later they move to Hollywood. They just keep broadening the scope of these places, these institutions, let's call them. But here's Sydney, played by Neve Campbell, and her friends at college. All of them, almost all of them, who wind up dead, slashed to death, and they don't know who the killer is. And the mean girls run up on them. Here we go.
That's her.
Yeah.
Hello, girls. Enjoying yourselves?
Oh, hello, Sister Lois, Sister Murphy.
Hello, Pledge. Hi, Sydney.
Hey,
This must be flat out hell for you. How are you holding up?
I managed.
It's really weird, isn't it? To think this fuss is all because of you. I mean, not directly, but in some 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon way.
Yeah. Now, Hallie, are you gonna bring your friend to our little martini mixer tonight?
I have a lot of work
We'll
to do.
be there.
Oh, good. Because Sid, we have our eyes on you. You hang in there, and if there is anything we can do.
The Delta Lambdas are very sensitive to your plight.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
You gonna start to dress like that once you get in?
That's not gonna happen.
The Delta Lambdas are the biggest bunch of fucking...
Hey! I'm pledging Delta Lambda, thank you.
All right. That should bring up memories of the mass killer, the spree killer, who, before he went on his rampage, by the way, killed 3 of his roommates, who are all yellows, in Isla Vista, California, Santa Barbara, California. One, Elliot Rodger, who's understood only by, I'm talking about academic types, as an incel. They came up with a label saying, oh, it's an incel problem. Just like this guy up in or a Mutah is a furry, right? Just put a label on them, and then that explains the whole phenomenon in the dreams of the agencies that are behind these types of operations. But he targeted women from sororities. And in this film later, I won't show you the clips of it, their little bracelet, their little insignia, I think what Alpha, Gamma, Kappa, whatever it is, becomes part of the plot point. It helps rescue her from being, Sydney, from being stabbed to death. Anyway, I won't get into the fine points there, but I'll expand on that if I ever write about this. The role of the sorority secret societies at the university. That's what they are. They come out of the secret society world, but that's another talk altogether. All right, let's, before we move on to the concluding thoughts here, let's finish with Sean Sexton Cunningham, born 1941, producer, director, writer. He went to Franklin Marshall College, which, by the way, as I alluded to earlier, it's in the heart of Pennsylvania Dutch country, right? Just like the serial killers that I alluded to in a previous talk here. This one guy who was a doctoral student, I think it was at Penn State and Happy Valley, who murdered a woman up there in the library, who managed to beat the rap. He got away with it. He was a stabber. Check back a couple months, few months maybe. So that's Franklin and Marshall. God, fine. Okay, he comes from that area. That could be purely coincidental. But then I find out that he got his Master of Fine Arts at Stanford University. So that's like Roger Corman. Maybe they knew each other. Who knows? He would be younger, of course. But maybe it's the school ties. But more likely it's because Stanford is a CIA institution of higher, well, they all are, but Stanford particularly so, because it's a private institution and it has a better cover, let's say. It has a less responsibility to the public charter, Stanford. So Corman comes out of it, but people like the writer and the countercultural figure Ken Kesey, right? He was part of the counterculture, the acid trip people, the LSD people. And you know about Hal Puthoff and SRI at Stanford, and you know about Philip Zimbardo, the obedience. There's a lot of these really questionable characters that came out of there. And you know that the Bay Area, based on my reading, and you've seen it in the talks here, is also an area where there are a lot of these different social experiments. I should call them antisocial experiments hovering around from the South Bay, Stanford, Palo Alto, all the way up to Oakland, San Francisco, and the North Bay, like Marin County. Marin County is spookland. By the way, Robin Williams grew up in Marin County, not accidental. His father was a Detroit automobile executive, right? I gave a talk on that. His connection, probable connection, Robin Williams, to intelligence. So that is Sean Sexton Cunningham. And which film did he contribute to this mass traumatization of the millennials? Let's take a look. And I haven't seen this film. I only found out about this film today as I was prepping for this. But I will watch it. It's a documentary. Here's the trailer for the documentary based on the film directed by Cunningham, who was the guy that discovered Wes Craven, you might say.
I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason.
To me, he's the most fearsome, awesome, indestructible, mysterious figure in movie history.
The fans so adore this character. They like Jason more than they like the survivors.
The best horror movies find a way to tap into something that's truly human. We don't know why, but it's something in us that likes to be scared.
Still to this day, it was the most.
Hopefully you recognize Corey Feldman, right? One of the two Corys, the other being Corey Haim, who committed suicide, and Corey Feldman, who was promising to release all this information about, let's say, untoward acts towards underage people in Hollywood. This is the guy, Corey Feldman.
Terrifying thing I've ever shot.
I don't watch the movie. I pick somebody out in the audience and then watch the evolution of their heart attack.
The people just flew out of the seats and ran out of the theater.
The modern horror movie was kind of boring.
The parents didn't want you to see it, which only made you want to see it that much more.
That's where the power lies, is Jason never dies because the audience brings him back to life.
Terror struck across my face, my heart. Everybody took me outside. Are you okay? Are you okay? No, I'm not okay.
So you might want to check that out. It is available on TubeView. I'm a premium subscriber, so I don't get the commercials. I don't know if you can get it with your regular subscription, but it's probably worth checking out if you have a serious interest in films like Friday the 13th. And I will remind you that the choice of that title is no accident. It's not just the fact that it's supposed to be an unlucky day, but the phrase or the association with bad luck, Friday the 13th, goes back to the execution of Jacques de Molay, right? The Knight Templar, who was executed in Hôtel de Fay in the streets of Paris. And someone shouted once the king was assassinated, he said, Jacques de Molay, you are it's part of the lore. That's Friday the 13th. All right. You don't think the director, you don't think Sean Cunningham knows all this backstory? You can bet your bottom dollar he do. All right, let's move on. So to conclude, we'll return to Wes Craven, and he talks about his inspiration for his pre-Scream franchise movies, like the house. What is it called? The House on the. Well, I won't guess. This is his inspiration. It's from this documented problem that Hmong people. This is an ethnic minority from Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Hill people, who are mercenaries, by the way, for the CIA, Central Intelligence Agencies, off the books, who are dying mysteriously. There are men, however, men only, not the women, not the children, just men of a certain age. And this is Wes Craven's explanation.
Nightmare on Elm Street as a story seems to have its roots in these articles in the.
Sorry. Let me start that again.
Nightmare on Elm Street as a story seems to have its roots in these articles in the Los Angeles Times. The first article was about a young man, Asian descent, dying in the middle of a nightmare. He and the family had come out of relocation camps in Southeast Asia during the time of Pol Pot, when hundreds of thousands of people were just being slaughtered. About a year later, there was a second article. Then about 6 months later, the third, and the third one just got me. That was a young man whose father was a doctor. They had come out of relocation camps. He was having nightmares, and he was telling his family that There's something after me, and I'm afraid if I don't stay awake, it'll kill me. This kid decided he was going to stay awake. Sleeping pills the father had been demanding that he take were found under his pillow. He hadn't taken any of them. And he had a coffee pot in his closet full of black coffee with a long extension cord that he had hidden behind curtains. They were all sitting in the living room watching a movie, and he just kind of fell asleep. Carried him upstairs, put him to bed, pulled the covers over him, and everybody goes, thank God. Everybody goes to bed in the middle of the night. They hear screaming. They run into his room, and before they get to him, he is dead. Oh man, I got to do a movie about that.
Now, who's that picture at the very end, if you were paying attention? It's a mugshot. The guy's name is McCain. He killed his, at least it's being suspected, he allegedly killed his Hmong wife. Her name's Nikki Cheng Say-Lee McCain. So you see, and this is recently, right? And this is up not far from where I am, up in the Shasta County area, Redding, California. Right up I-5. That's the serial killer corridor, by the way, I-5. So you see this bloodlust that's seeping through the earth, right? That's very much through the sensibility of someone like Wes Craven, who was the Vietnam era person. I don't know why he wasn't in the military, either as a volunteer or as a draftee. I was drafted, but I managed to get out of it. That's another story altogether. Maybe he was too old. He's older than me, but not by much. I think he was draft age. But certainly he would have been familiar with not just the story of these Hmong men dying in their sleep. By the way, I realized today when I was putting together this talk, it wasn't some sort of mysterious disease. I think they were killed. I think they had some kind of connection to the intelligence or the Golden Triangle, the dope network that was involved between the United States, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and other parts of the world. So they were targeted because they're only men of a certain age who would have been in those types of situations. They knew too much. So some of these guys, by the way, the veterans of these wars, the Opium Wars, the Vietnam, Afghanistan, and more recent ones down in Mexico, such as the ones that I talked about in this book, The Fort Bragg Cartel. Excellent. I did this a couple of weeks ago. They're up there in the Redding area, Shasta. They're up there in the Orem, Utah. They're up there in Idaho, Washington, and all that. That's also where the serial killers are and the snipers are located. These are SAS, Special Forces people, maybe even up to the Delta Force level. Right. But this came out of the Vietnam War. Here's the My Lai massacre, which shocked the nation when it was revealed, the systematic slaughter of yellow civilians in My Lai. And all the people that were involved with it walked. All right. It's not just Brian Koberger spending the rest of his life in prison and escaping the death penalty. It's also these individuals like William Calley, Ernest Medina, and others who were exonerated by these military tribunals.
Bà con chúng tôi sinh sống ở một cái làng quê rất là yên bình. Bỗng dưng vào 5 giờ 30 của buổi sáng ngày 16 tháng 3 số 8 là quân đội Mỹ bắn xối xả vào làng tôi. Đến hơn 8 giờ thì họ đến gia đình tôi. Là có 3 người lính Mỹ, 1 người da đen, 2 người da trắng. Bắt đầu họ bắn 3 con bò trong chuồng của nhà tôi và đốt cả nhà trên nhà dưới chuồng bò. Và họ dí súng vào trong người, họ bắt 6 mẹ con tôi chui lại vào cái hầm tránh phố của gia đình. Mẹ tôi bảo các con chui vào trước mẹ chui vào sau để mẹ cản đạn cho các con. Mẹ tôi chui vào khỏi miệng hầm thì lính Mỹ đánh lựu đạn xuống tứ tấp. Thân xác của mẹ, chị và các em tôi đã tan tành. Đứa em gái út của tôi đứt làm đôi. Thì lúc này là tôi bị thương và tôi nằm thiếp ở trong cái ngôi hầm này. Mãi đến 4 giờ chiều Mỹ rút đi. Cha tôi và các người trong làng còn sót lại về để lượm xác chết lên để chôn. Thấy tôi còn thở. Khi mà ẵm tôi lên là mình đầy máu. Tóc mẹ, chị em tôi là coi như dính đầy trên người, trên quần áo tôi. Quần áo tôi thì cũng rách tả tơi, không còn gì cả và tôi bị thương nhiều chỗ ở trong người và trong đầu.
If you want to know where these characters like Freddy Krueger come from, or Leatherface, or the people, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's the repressed violence that's a carryover from the Vietnam War, right? And also current wars, U.S.-Mexico, for example. Just so you know, I'm not making up, brief clip from CBS News. You'll perhaps recognize the voice of Mike Walenshinsky, anglicized to Mike Wallace, talking about how the Hmong were used as cannon fodder by the Central Intelligence Agency.
Personnel and Popule told us they were ordered to keep the Hmong in combat, even though Americans on the spot realized it was a lost cause.
We kept these guys fighting for us. That's right. Even after you and a lot of others thought it was pointless. That's right.
By the time the U.S. finally pulled out in 1975, the Hmong had been decimated. Out of their total population in Laos of no more than 350,000, 10,000 had been killed, tens of thousands more wounded. Their casualty rate was 100 times higher than that of the United States in Vietnam.
And there's ample historical information, books, articles, and videos on TubeU if you want to look into the hidden history of it. By the way, when I taught this material to my students, many of them Vietnamese American, they're the children of these refugee people or Hmong. It would be very upsetting to them. And guess what? They would turn their anger on me and rat me out to the administration. And more than once, I got visits from the counseling center or the vice provost or various deans saying, "What are you doing showing these clips to these students?" I said, "This is their history. They need to know how they got to California, to the United States. They're part of this historical progression." Anyway, that's another case. It's just one of the ironies of this. There's one woman that ratted me out in one of my inquiries. I was put on trial by the University of California attorneys. One of them was a Vietnamese American woman. So I figured, well, her dad was probably a spy. He was probably a rat who was working for the CIA, who came to the U.S. And I'm telling you this because this is when I realized, why am I advocating for this group? It would be like advocating for Nazis who left Germany and came and settled into Huntsville, Alabama. So at this point, I stopped calling myself Asian American and began calling myself yellow. Do you understand now? It's kind of a long awakening for myself. The hard way. I had to understand why the group that I was advocating on behalf turned against me and wanted me dead. They wanted me deprived of a livelihood. Well, I say, well, that's who they are. That's who they are. These are mercenaries. And even if they are Vietnamese or Filipino or Korean, they are mercs. They work for the New World Order. All right. Just like Dr. Pan and these other characters. All right. So keep that in mind when when I talk about yellow this or yellow that. It's much more complicated than what some of the fanboys might say in the comment areas. All right, so we have this whole system of mercenaries, special forces, Delta Force, Green Berets that were in Asia, 20 years old, 21. Their first taste of orgiastic sex was in Vietnam or on R&R in the Philippines or in Okinawa, Japan, where I lived for 1 year and got to see the whole system, the way it's set up. These camp towns, or South Korea, Busan, it's a military camp. There are camps like this run by the U.S. military all over the world, and in every place the women are pimped out to the American soldier. So when they come back to the U.S. to resume civilian life, they want themselves a yeller women. And one of them found it. Of course, he's of a younger generation, but the historical pattern repeats itself. And all her sisters married these military type guys who lost their virginity in the whorehouses of Saigon or wherever else, of Bangkok, Chiang Mai. By the way, all those places, the tourist places, the sex tourism places that were patronized by Americans, Germans, Brits, and Australians, they're all going downhill. That whole industry is dead. Largely because that generation's partly it's aged out, but also government pressure. I mean, there's a whole story behind it. But that whole whorehouse syndrome of Asia as the Yankee whorehouse is no more. And it's also the rise of China, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, South Korea, of course. They don't want to be turned into a giant whorehouse. But anyway, there was a case recently that I alluded to earlier in this talk about a woman who was from a family of among the refugees. Her name's Nikki Cheng Se Lee McCain. And her body has not been found yet. So who's going to make sensational grist for the mill? One of these histophilic commentators, they're all women, by the way, even the so-called behavioral psychologists who I despise. They brought the sisters on air in the Nancy Grace show. Do you know Nancy Grace? One of my favorite personalities. In fact, she is pointed to for causing the death of this woman named Melinda Duckett, who was a Asian orphan, a refugee type herself, even though her name was Duckett. I think she was an adoptee who got in some sort of trouble. And Nancy Grace, Melinda Duckett, look it up for yourself to get an idea of who this person, Nancy Grace, is. She's a vampire. She's a predator. And I don't care if this gets back to her, because I never would be on this show. I'm not a hybristophilic psychologist like the type of people she invites on, or they're usually gay. They're men, they're gay. So I don't fit the profile. Plus, I'll talk about the My Lai massacre. I will talk about Wes Craven. I will talk about the nitty-gritty of these types of race-based crimes. So here's Nancy Grace.
Night, devastated sisters hear grisly facts in the missing Nikki Chang case, now upgraded to murder. But where's the body? Good evening, I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us. Mom's Chevy is found abandoned on a remote country road Nikki's case is a homicide investigation.
There were several assaults on Nikki.
A brutal assault on Nikki prior to her disappearing, prior to her Chevy being found abandoned on a remote country road.
She thought she was going to die.
Where is Nikki? A brutal assault at the hands of this guy.
I'm John McCain. I'm the husband of Nikki McCain. First of all, I would like to thank the Sheriff's Office, FBI, for getting involved. Any efforts that might help bring my wife home safely. We miss you.
He's kind of fumbling around. Listen to more of that.
I don't really know what to say. I haven't been in the public eyes, and I haven't done very well with it. I apologize to everyone, especially my children, my wife's family, mine as well. I'm just here in support, so anything that I can do, I want to do that.
You don't know what to say. Your wife, the mother of your children, has disappeared, and you don't know what to say. What a crock of steaming BS. Dubé with me, defense attorney Philip Dubé. Here he is pleading for his wife's return. He's like,
now that has special forces written all over its face. This is like right out of this book. That's what I see. Now, I haven't been able to confirm that, so I will leave you to fill in the details of this case. Look under McCain. I think it was Tyler McCain. Look under Nikki Saley Chang McCain. It's all over TubeView. There's all kinds of print articles on it. I myself am gathering material myself on the case, and it fits right into this analytical framework that I'm presenting in talking about this transgenerational trauma that's been engineered. And it keeps it in play too, thanks to people like Nancy Grace, because the Wes Craven movies only came out every year or so, right? But these true crime programs are now 24 hours a day, especially with TubeView as part of this continual traumatization process. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I promise not to go past 90 minutes, and I will stick with it. But I will return to this theme later on. I won't give it away now, but I'll be talking more specifically about the Charlie Kirk situation up there in Utah and how it fits into this larger framework. It's more than the story of a transitioning, furry, fancier fandom would-be assassin, right? There's a lot going on there. And you and me, we're going to get closer to the truth, and we're going to launch our own investigation. And I'll close today by saying I'm so gratified that I haven't heard a single person say, well, we need a Warren-style commission, like in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We need a government inquiry. We need the FBI to look into this, right? We know that that's an exercise in futility because they're complicit. So we're the public, you and me, we are at the point where we're just going to do it ourselves, and we don't even need any sort of validation or cooperation by Kash Patel or Pam Bondi or any of these characters. We're just doing it ourselves. And we're doing a pretty darn good job at it too, if I may say so. Not me specifically, you know, I'm just contributing what I can. But together we are coming up with solutions, as we should, for the people and by the people. right? We are the government. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I'm sorry. I don't mean to chuckle, but I want to leave us in a better state of mind, because this is a pretty grisly way of understanding American history. But it's true, and I have to give Wes Craven credit for it. He confronted it in his art. Good, bad, or ugly, this is what he chose to do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. I'll be back with you for this channel on Sunday, God willing, and I don't have a time set for a return visit to Sean Atwood, but if you are on my Patreon, you'll be notified. You'll get the heads up as soon as I learn. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. We'll see you soon, God willing. Thank you. Bye.